Hello, my name is Wojtek and I'm a concept artist for film and video games. Today, I would like to take you through the process of creating this key art. Welcome to Chapter 2, Building, where we'll be taking care of building up all the assets needed for the illustration. We'll be learning the tools that will be very useful for streamlining the process of coming up with all of those objects that we need in our scene. And I will be introducing you to a few cool resources that I'm constantly using in my workflow. So let's dive in. Before we move on, I would like to talk a little bit about DAZ 3D and the way I use it. It's a great piece of software. I cannot resist using it because it's free, because it's one of the best softwares out there that enable you to pose figures efficiently and export them together with the rig into other pieces of software that later you render stuff out. It turns out now you can use Iray, Path Trace NVIDIA renderer inside of VAS, which makes it extremely valuable and sometimes even enables you to skip the export part and use the 3D render directly from DAZ, which is great. What I want to do now is quickly go through the basic stuff I use DAZ at, which is character load, posing, cameras, lights, and Iray. So these are the things I use DAZ for. What I enjoy doing here is trying to get the pose right, trying to see if it works from every angle, trying to design characters sometimes from the presets I've got. So it's really a great shortcut for me to get the jump start on a character. So your viewport might look a little bit different. So I adjusted mine. On the left, I have this Smart Content tab. You should see it on your screen, where you can find all of the presets that come together with DAZ. You'll probably have a little bit less, maybe a little more if you are using it already. These are the files you buy on their marketplace, and this is the stuff you actually pay for. So let's see. You usually start from loading in the character. So let's use the free one. Let's say Genesis 8 female. This is the latest one. So you double click it, then it loads into the scene. You just have to give it a little bit of a wait. There you go. There goes our character. And to just get a quick example of how NVIDIA Iray accelerates and elevates the experience of DAZ is to turn on the NVIDIA Iray viewport, which you do by clicking this little ball here and switching to NVIDIA Iray. Then you just have to give it a second to load into a graphics card, and there you go. It's really fast, and it gives you almost immediate results with quite a lot of detail. So what I was surprised by loading, these models into Iray within DAZ is how well they respond to light already, and how much detail you actually get out of those models. So I will go over that a little bit later, but really impressed by, you get that stuff for free. Why not take advantage of that? So let's turn off the Iray preview now and try to dress this character. So if you go to wardrobe, we can use the basic clothes from the lady, just double clicking basic wear. There you go. It's really that easy. Double clicking those assets is super easy. Basically, once you have your character clicked, the Smart Content tab shows you the compatible content. Let's try to put some hair. I'll double click the hair. Now I have to wait a little bit. There you go. So that's my hair. All right, so what do you do with a model like that? You can click and drag on limbs to modify their position. You can also click and use the gizmo to do that. What I like to do is use the preset poses that I also got over the years to, find what I like as a starting point most of the time. So if you go to products, let's say adventure poses, and let's get a pose like that, double click, and there you go. So this is how I would probably go into DAZ and try to see if that pose works for me. Then I would adjust it, trying to get it just right for my case. And I will go over specific stuff that I do with the character for my illustration. This is just an example to show you how I work in DAZ. Now, you also have this interesting render settings tab right here. If you don't have it, just click Window, Panels, and Render Settings. And once I open up NVIDIA Array, again, wait a little bit for it to load. You can see this character is lit in a specific way that I can also modify by hitting Environment right here. What you can do is change the environment intensity, choose whether you want to draw the HDRI or not, rotate the HDRI dome. You can see by rotating it, you can see that it actually changes the shadow direction. So the HDRI is being rotated. What I like to do also is take advantage of the daylight system. If you would click here and choose sun sky only, you can basically use the daylight system with your time being plugged in here. So if I want the sun a little bit higher, I'll put 2 p.m. And this is actually lit with the sky stuff, and you can see it once I just click draw dome. You can see the time on that being changed. So let's say, let's put it into noon. Okay, so it's a top-down view. All right, so this is one of the ways you can light these characters. You can see how quick it responds here due to my RTX cards being plugged in. And if you're interested, if you go to advanced, you can see all of the cards being plugged into this engine right now, which are 4 RTX 2080 Ti's. And that's why we're getting such a fast render time. It's almost real time right now. So this is great. This is great for preview. This is great for checking out the lighting. What I also like to do, and what gives me a little bit more freedom in art directing those scenes, is sometimes I don't want to have any light at all. So I might go as far as go to render settings, editor, and say scene only. All right. What you see right now is a little bit weird. It's a light that is attached to the perspective camera. So what we need to do right now, I just turn on texture shaded for now. And I would go to cameras, hit add camera, show options, copy active view. What that will do, it will copy the view I have in here, and it will let me control the camera separately. So once I've hit it, now I have to switch to that camera view. Now I'm in that camera view, and what I have to do is turn that annoying thing off, which is a headlamp, and you will see the difference. Let me pop up this NVIDIA Array renderer. There you go. And here I'm turning the headlamp off. Okay, so it's completely dark. And this is exactly what I want. I want to lit the scene entirely on my own. So what I can do here is add a distant light, add a point light, add a linear point light, and a spotlight. I'm mostly using only distant lights and point lights, so that's what I will go through. Once you hit add a new distant light, hit accept, and it's really, really weak once you've added it. If you want to change its settings, you go to lights, and from this tab, you choose the light you want to go with. So now we'll just try to put it behind my character to backlight her. Let's say that's what I want, art direction wise. And now I want to increase its intensity. It's by changing the lumen amount. And that's what I would probably increase, just increasing the amount of zeros, really. Yeah, that might be too much. And you cannot really see any reflected light, but you can see the shadow. And this is really a trick because it draws a shadow on the plane that isn't reflecting in the light. And what I want here is to showcase that this is an actual RTX render. So all of the GI is actually, ray traced. Everything is ray traced here. So you will see the difference once I add a basic plane. And let's scale it up. And let's change it's pretty funky right now because I cranked up the light intensity. So let me turn it down now a little bit. All right. Let's go to surfaces, click on that plane, maybe just change it to the base color to neutral gray, something in the middle. Okay. And now let's increase that light intensity. So what I'm doing now is just playing around with what I have here in order to show you the spectrum of things you can do in DAZ. It's not only posing, but you can actually do a fair bit of rendering, which surprised me. So it's pretty cool. You should give it a try if you've used DAZ before. And this is really a great way to jumpstart your images. So let's try to zoom in a little bit. Let's try to do a portrait shot. You might see my cards going a little bit loud in the background. This is because they work hard now on getting all of these rays traced perfectly. So, sorry for that. So as you can see, all of those are ray traced and all of the GI is ray traced, which is pretty cool. And if we let it render just a little bit, you can see all of the nice detail that comes with these free models. So let's maybe make it into a really cold light source by changing the Kelvin into something really cold. What we can do also is change the color of this light. So just moving it a little bit into the cyans might do the trick. Let's try a little bit more saturated blues. Let's try even more. Like that. There we go. And let's tone down the intensity here. There you go. So we have a nice night light here, right? And let's try to counter that with some warm lights around here. Okay, that would probably sidelit the character or something. So we have the cold light backlighting her. Let's try to put some warm lights here. So creating point light, accept. And what I can do quickly here is switch to perspective view, grab that light, place it to the side of my character. let's say like this. And now, using the same tools as I've discussed before, I would probably change its temperature to something like 2,500 to 3,000, something like candlelight. And then I would increase its intensity, which I can do by adjusting lumen, maybe just 10 times more. There you go. So now if I switch to the camera, see I've got this quick light that is lighting my character. We can try giving it maybe even a little bit more intensity. That might be a little bit too much, so let's tone it down to like 10,000, 100,000. You can see as I move this light, let's move it a little bit, it might be a little bit more to this side, and a little bit up. And let's make it really settle. All right. Now maybe let's try to make it 3 times more. So what I'm doing here is basically art directing a shot a little bit here. So what I find really interesting about that is that you can actually use it directly in your artwork, just like that. And right now what I'm thinking, oh, it's too dark in here in the front. So maybe I would actually add a headlamp to this and see how it works. See how much it adds. It's way too much. So headlamp intensity can be turned down to like something like 0.1, which gives me a settle, fill, and a little bit of spec. What you can do with those actors is also make them, they're posable, and they have settings for mimics of the face and certain bends and poses that you can adjust. So once you click the feature you want to modify, in this case I want to add some emotion to her face, you can go to posing. Now it's chosen the head, you click pose controls and can scroll through all of these settings that are available in the version, in the free version. So let's maybe make her frown a little bit. And maybe let's try to click her eyes, and if we actually go back and click here, we can see all of the settings here and click head, eyes, and let her eyes go to the side. So you can sort of use this as an actor that you can tell your story with by choosing where she's looking, what kind of emotion she has, and these tools I will be using to for my artwork that I'm creating now with the girl with the force on the street. Yeah, we can add a little bit of a smile. Now actually changes a lot for the better. Makes it look a way more, realistic. So what you can do also with those cameras that you have is you can go as far as having that beautiful lens aperture bokeh effect, if you will. So that's due to great iRay implementation. Go to the lens, we can choose the lens. Under camera, there is a focal length that you can change. You can make it, let's say, into 100. So that's a little bit of a close-up here. And we can try turning on depth of field to see how it works. And now we have to adjust the focal distance, and that takes a little bit of playing around to see, where the focus is. In this case, I'm going the wrong way. Way still. So there's a setting, I think here, that says point at, and you can set it to look at Genesis female 8 and just click accept. That doesn't help. So if you would start typing in here, you can find a number that is proper for your focal distance. I think in this case it's around 75, 78. Yeah, so around here you have a shot like this. All right, so you can see how much you can really get out of this rendering engine, coupled together with DAZ 3D. It creates a lot of cool effects that you can play around with that you can directly use by rendering those characters out. Let's say I have an illustration that I need, a character like that for. What I would do is have my character sketched out. I would pose it here in DAZ, and then what I would do is basically pose and render out the character straight in here, skipping, I don't know, Blender or Octane, and this would be a great start for me. Great information about light with that path tracing capabilities. So if I would hit render now, let me just quickly take a look at my render settings here. We'd go to general. There's your resolution here. Let's say this is good. This is good enough. If you go to render settings, general, you can adjust the render resolution. So if I would hit render now, it will stop that interactive mode and will start the proper render. So as you can see, it just popped up and it's really quick. And what is nice, it saves it as a PNG with an alpha. So you can quickly just drag and drop a character like that into your scene, paint over, and treat it as a great base for your work. So this is my quick introduction into DAZ and the way I use it. What I've started noticing in recent years is that I'm actually using iRay more and more because of how nicely all of these textures work together. And if I don't need the character interacting with a lot of prop, I might skip exporting it and just do it straight in DAZ. So hope you enjoyed this little introduction, and let's move on into creating the character for the scene I'm doing a tutorial on. So let's go DAZ some stuff. So here I will be using a lot of the assets that I've already purchased through DAZ 3D library. And I'm going for the sort of an adventurous look. So sort of urban and casual, but not like your usual work clothes. Something more looking like a trek adventurous style outfit. So I'm going for jeans, some tank top, and a backpack, and a red hairstyle, together with some more rugged shoes. And now I'm turning on the NVIDIA iRay renderer to just see how it overall stacks up. Creating a quick camera, trying to see if I like what I see. And I like the toned down color of the shirt. I think it will work well with her red hairstyle color. I'm looking for some more accessories that I could add here in the library. Just considering another piece of garment, but I think I ended up just not going for it, as it just makes her silhouette a little bit less readable. Now trying different types of brows and finally posing her into a default position so that now I'm ready to move on into posing her, which will be a much harder task. So I have my sketch, and here what I'm trying to do is sort of match the energy of the sketch and match my idea of the pose I wanted to create with this 3D model, which is not easy. So a lot of back and forth here. I'm trying to figure out how that pose would look like in real life. So I'm actually standing up and trying to pose myself in that position, noticing like how my legs are and how my feet plant, how my what my body is doing, so that I can translate it into the DAZ model. What I found out is that your pose in DAZ has to look good from every angle. If it doesn't look good from every angle, there is something wrong with it. If it looks like somebody would fall, if you look at it from in the viewport, it will look wrong in the shot that you're going for. So I wouldn't design the pose around the shot, but I would make it work in every pose. It doesn't have to look nice from each position of the camera, but it has to look believable so that it really looks like that person is actually standing with gravity. So right now I'm experimenting with a bit of emotion on her face, trying to mix a couple of different faces, trying a couple of different poses for hairstyle. And here I tried a couple of different colors for the outfit too, but I ended up reverting that and going back to the red hairstyle. The next problem that we have to solve for the illustration that we're creating is the realistic looking car destruction, which is tricky because if you try to hand sculpt it, let's try to give it a go. I have a little car model here, okay? And what I can try doing is take this model. I'm in Blender now, so I'll be using Blender for this particular task. Let's just turn on ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. All right. And once this object is chosen, let's go to sculpt mode. Let's choose maybe just a grab, right? Let's try to grab it and push some things around. As you can see, it does a good job with like deformation, but it doesn't really look that realistic. We can certainly use it in this tool in some parts, so sculpting it directly and then maybe using like a, I don't know, like a pinch brush to to manually pinch some areas, right? But I don't find this super effective. I think it looks a little bit too cartoony, stretching some parts a little bit too much. And while this brush grab tool and deform will come useful, it won't be my main tool to deal with those problems here. So let's undo all of that real quick. And I'll try to showcase the tool I'm thinking of using for this particular task here with just a plane first, right? We have a little plane here. Let's try to make it a little bigger. Also, let's go into edit mode and subdivide it a couple of times. I have to select first. Edit mode. Subdivide again. Something like this will be just fine. So let's go into the sculpt node. And what I would like to show you guys now is this new tool called a new brush in the sculpt mode. It's called cloth brush. And what it does, it combines sculpting with partial simulation, which is great in our case because it gives us freedom to art direct where do we want the simulation to happen and how it looks like. And it has that manual hand intent in it while retaining the realistic simulation part, which is great. So what I'm doing here is choosing the brush, choosing the main mode, and the only thing you need to do now is maybe just set this plane to shade smooth and go back to the sculpt node. And the only thing you need to do now is just move this brush around, and what you can see is that simulation is happening live on the brush. It looks quite amazing that you can actually pull the fabric in a certain direction and then just like keep playing with it, and has this nice looking simulated, really realistic look. So it's not only deforming based on my hand movement, it grabs its general direction and puts a simulated realistic high frequency detail on top of that, which is exactly what I need for my card deformations. There are a couple of other modes that this brush can work in, and these are, you can choose them by hitting this brush dialog and choosing push, for example. And what we can do is push in the fabric so that it's sticking down, right? And it's all happening inside the viewport, which is great. You can put it into the rendered view. And this is what's great about Blender. It's that this rendering engine is giving me the live preview of what I want to sculpt on top of. So I can also switch to cycles real quick and set it to GPU. And it turned out it might be just as fast because of the RTX capabilities. It's just incredibly fast. And in order for it to render properly, I would probably have to put a subdivide modifier, subdivision surface modifier on top of that cloth. And now you can see that it just works as fast as Eevee does within the viewport, rendering incredibly fast. And I'm not talking yet about the viewport denoising, which is possible due to the RTX cores that 2080 Ti's does contain. So if I turn that on, you can see the change, right? So if I move the viewport now, it's noisy. and then bam, suddenly just becomes super smooth. So this is the AI magic that is possible due to the RTX capabilities of these cards. So if you want to take advantage of them, RTX cards are just a great companion in my creative workflows. So if I turn that OptX AI off, you'll see the noise is visible for quite a while. Let's turn that on again. It's just almost immediate. Let's try to move the light. Right, super fast. It's just a basic material, but it gives you an overview of how software can use, how software accelerated these things can work, right? So it gives you an overview of how developers can take advantage of these additional cores they have on their disposal in order to create these incredibly fast render times using combination of advanced path traced GPU computing and denoising features for that last leap of detail, right? So let's get back to the car. All right, let's see how it goes with how our cloth brush does with this car model. So let's switch back to EV and let's open Ford. There you go. Let's turn off that plane. And we have our car here. Let's start by going into the sculpt mode again. Choosing my cloth brush. I can now start by just going in and pushing. See how damage is being done to the car, and it's partially simulated. I know it's not cloth, the stuff that cars are made from, but when a really huge force is applied to surfaces like these, almost look as if it was like folded. The steel was folded together with the aluminum and all of the materials that happened to crash with the car. And sometimes it might become a little bit buggy, but you can see how much more fidelity I get. Sometimes it makes those parts disappear. So what you can do is change this mode to push, and this will simulate pushing into the car as if it would crash into something, right? You can see all the parts are dissolving and getting hit. Let's try to simulate a side crash. Okay, so we here have a realistic looking hole, and we might just apply this again. Maybe there is some... The brush is too big, it might make parts disappear. Or there's still some small errors here and there happening, but that won't stop me from using this amazing tool. I bet the developers will make it even more awesome. I have a little problem with this roof. Let's try to make it so that brush is contained. Maybe it's not a good idea, but you can see how the parts are just getting shredded, and you can see how it's folding. And you have all of that complexity and layering on using that brush, right? So this is just awesome. And you will see me doing that with a couple of car models that I will later import into Cinema and use there together with my scene. Let's try, see what would happen if I would just push it here. You can see parts being torn apart. Skin from the car is falling off. And this is exactly the type of distraction detail I'm using and I'm looking for. Let's try to use a different mode. Maybe just grab. Yeah, so here you can just push in, create these really dramatic looking indents and crashes, right? So let's say something hit that car here. Super strong. Let's try a pinch point. See what this does. Maybe to here. Cannot see any difference, but let's take a closer look. So I'm still experimenting with that tool. It's really new and I'm trying to see, what it does. Some of those will work, some of these won't, but I'm always happy to experiment. And you would think that this tool might be useful for just cloth, right? And nothing else. But it turns out if you sometimes connect the dots in not a conventional manner, it might turn out that something that you can creatively come up with the ways to use the tools you already know in a different way. So let's move on. In a sec, you will see a time lapse of me working on a couple of cars like that, depending on in which in which car I want to see what type of crash detail and how they are deformed, stuff like that. So you can see I'm having just a lot of fun with this tool. Give it a go. Try some different applications that this tool can work for, and I bet it will be awesome. Now let's just change the material quick so we can judge it. Let's take body, make it more metallic, take down the roughness, increase specularity, down the roughness, maybe it's a little bit too metallic. All right, and what I can load into here is a little plane. So let me go into the object mode, add a plane. Just want to have a surface that my car would stand on. Let's increase the distance on ambient occlusion. All right, and let's turn this on. You can see even in EV, this is workable. This is something better that we could get from better than the regular sculpting tools, and this will come really useful in the stage where I will need realistic reflections on those parts and stuff, especially when I put it in Octane. We can take a look how it looks in Cycles. You can see how this is a path trace render, and the renders times on this guy are just incredible, incredibly fast. It's 2 to 3 seconds and it's done. So I'm really impressed, and I love how Blender is expanding these days, and I love that they take advantage of the RTX workflows. So happy to use it, and it's taking more and more of my workflows, especially with the combination of real-time render as Eevee and a super quick cycles renderer combined together into this powerful package, together with a lot of really cool tools. So let's move on and crash some cars. So here we are. This is my instruction that I created using the cloth brush. It can crush, literally. Blender can crush a little bit since it's alpha version, so be careful. It crashed on me like 2 times. You will probably see that in the time-lapse video. So I wouldn't really use that version for production, and that's why I will be taking this into Octane and shading it and placing it in the scene. You can see my super ugly sketch plan here. So I tried to look up this sketch while sculpting distraction on these and thinking, oh, maybe, you know, I need a car with a distraction to the side. I need a car that is maybe flipped over or crashing into the ground. So I was thinking a little bit about that, to have those assets ready, to be able to just place them and compose my shot within Cinema 4D. If it happens that I will have a car here, let's say, that is, you know, not that doesn't have a nice shape or something, I can still take it back to Blender and push it and pull it so that I get the exact silhouette I want. What I noticed while doing those guys, while making all of that distraction here, is that let's see if it crashes now, is that the most effective brush to push and pull polygons for distraction is grab deformation mode. By default, it's set to drag. So if you take grab, you can see that, oh, not that car. I think I'm set to a different one, this one. Yes, so you can see how much it changes, how strongly it affects it. And if it's too strong, just tone down strength to be a little bit more settled, so maybe you have a little bit more control. To be honest, I find this tool amazing, and I think there are a lot more features that you can use it for. And yeah, I think you know, Blender is just making me really smile these days with all of these super cool features, and yeah, this will come really useful in the production of this illustration. So now let's move on. Another tool that I would like to talk about, that I will be using in the process of creating that illustration, are VDB Volumes. And these are a great and a quick way to add VFX into your 3D scene. So Octane is capable of adding those volumes manually through a certain node, and those links I'm using here will be in the description so that you can download a few of those examples here to use yourself. I've also found this really cool resource on Django FX, and they have a really beautiful high-res simulation here to download, to use for free, which is just amazing. This can weigh quite a lot since it just contains a lot of information. I might use this smoke and this smoke and maybe some fire effects. I'm not sure yet. So first, let's go through how I usually load it into the scene. So I have my files downloaded here. You can see those contain a lot of states of this effect. So this is just one effect. It just has a lot of frames. So it's an animated effect. So let's try to load it into Octane and see how it looks. In order to do that, I will just add a VDB volume object here. I'll change its type to VDB loader, since that's what we want to do. We want to load an external animation into your 3D scene. And now let's browse. And we have to browse to the file location. There you go. So now we can choose the very first frame from the list, and let's just see how many of those frames we have in that. 165. So that number we have to note in our heads, and then just click open. You can see the volumes appears here. And we have to put in the number, the end number to the animation that we noticed here. Now let's try to render this guy. You can see our smoke appearing in the viewport, which is great. This is exactly what we need. In order for me to see the smoke a little bit more clearly, I will maybe just add a plane, like a regular ground plane, and add a sun and sky environment. And let's just try to maybe rotate it. All right. Now there are a few things that we can do with this volume. There are a few settings that we can use, and as you can see, if I just scroll through my timeline, my smoke will start to change its form. You can see that a little bit. It emits, starts to animate into different states. We cannot see that smoke very clearly right now, and this is because the resolution and the density of voxels here is not that high. So what we can do in order to fix that is go to medium, and this tab is basically we are using it to control the material properties of that volume. There are a few presets here that you can click. Can be treated as fire, it can be treated as fog. By default, I think it has its fog properties loaded. And here you can see volume step length, right? So this means the amount of space between sort of how big the voxels are within my scene, right? So the smaller the voxels, the higher the overall resolution of that object. So once I start to decrease it, you can see smoke becoming more volumetric. So I use that setting to control the density of the object and its resolution, right? See how much detail starts to appear once this becomes less than 1 in value. And then you can control density of it. You can have a really thin but still higher in resolution, high in detail smoke. And this is great. This is exactly what I need for my scene. And thanks to RTX accelerated rendering, I can just render those super fast and don't have to worry about texture size, like texture buffer, or I don't have to worry about my scene crashing. I can just duplicate those many times and maybe just use different frames for certain positions in my scene. Okay. So this is really amazing. Be careful not to go too low with it. Might crash down if you overload that scene with it. Yeah, so this is pretty much it. Want some thicker smoke? It's great. What you can do is just like check it out and see. What's great is that it interacts with the objects in the scene, and you can iterate on your 3D scene immediately and create value separation with it. You can plan for your effects within your scene, which is great. We will still be doing some VFX work within Photoshop, of course, but this is just another way you can use your rendering power once you have it in order to maybe speed things up a little bit. Maybe let's try loading in another one. Let's delete this one, load another one, and change it to the VDB loader. Choose a file. Let's go back here. Let's maybe try gasoline explosion. Yep, that will be good. Again, loading in the first frame, and then there are 130 frames here. So open. Maybe since it's an explosion, maybe we will need a dark environment. So let's just put in a dark Octane sky, right? Type in 130. And see what happens if we have anything at all in here. Not right now, but let's change the medium type to fire. You can see right now we have our explosion happening in this scene, right? It's a little bit red. I think this is due the shader gradient that we have applied here. If we go to medium, open this up again, lowering step length will increase the overall resolution of this object. Okay, let's try to change the emission gradient. Maybe have a little bit more. Yeah, something like that is cool. Maybe we would need this color to be a little bit more intense. The intensity of the light, I mean. So going into texture emission and increasing that a little bit so it just emits more light. You can see it starts to getting that light emitted. Let's increase the amount of samples on that light, and you hit play, we'll be able to see that explosion slowly happening and simulating from these files we just loaded. You can do that with explosion, water simulations, dust effects, everything that can be simulated. And it's great because it is volumetric, and you can actually, you know, get in there and rotate around it, and looks different from every angle. This is actually a more interesting angle for this one. As you can see, this explosion, it has actual directionality to it, right? So this is pretty interesting. A nice little believable effects explosion. This becomes really cheap to use in my illustration workflow, which is why I want to take advantage of it and use it in my illustration. So this is VDB Volumes. You will see me use that in the third part of the tutorial. Yeah, so let's move on. Another tool I will be using in the course of making this illustration is Megascans. It's a great 3D asset resource with beautifully scanned materials and objects that are speeding up my workflow tremendously, where in spots where I need to supplement my scene with a realistic shader or photoreal looking object, I go there and I find the object and I get it super quickly into my scene, which is a great asset in itself, that you don't have to worry about all the cable work of the nodes and all the little materials. You might need to do some adjusting, but generally using software called Bridge that they developed, you can super quickly put these assets into your scene. So there is this little tiny gap between you finding the asset and having it in your scene. So I want to demonstrate that using Cinema. So I'll be using Cinema for probably the rest of this tutorial. And you can see that I have a scene with a little plane, right? Nothing is set up, and daylight object only, right? And what we'll try to do is import this material shader castle stone wall, all right? So it's already downloaded. I just hit export, loads into Cinema super fast. What we can do now is just check it out. Everything looks plugged in, and it's not you know, a super complex shader, but it would take some time to do all of this cable work here. So let's drag and drop it and hit render. So there you go. The only thing I would check is maybe push my displacement a little bit more. Oh, and it's set up to resolution that is too low. We need to set it up to 8K, and then we might just push it a tiny bit more. All right, and let's see how it looks using our camera. So there you go. It's a pretty photoreal looking image. Looks beautiful, even in macro. So it turns out that you don't really have to do it for materials only. What you can do is add whole 3D assets to your scene. So let's try adding maybe this wood root. Hit export. You can see it loads super fast. It's already in my scene. So what I can try doing is maybe scale it up a little bit. Let's check if displacement is loaded. Turns out it's not. Let's try to set the resolution high enough. And let's hit render. See how it looks. You might do a little bit of like tweaking and pushing here and there, but in general, it should look great from the start. I think it's loaded. It's loaded properly here. So yeah, this is how I use Megascans to supplement my scenes with some beautiful photoreal assets. All right, you will see me use that for that street scene using some of the assets that I found here, and I'll be probably doing some research now. You can type in a street, you can see a bunch of assets popping up, such as like stuff that can lay on the street, some 3D scan trash cans and road blocks and some concrete pads. I'll be using some of that to, or even debris might come useful. Stuff like that laying on the ground, it's extremely useful. So I'll be using all of these during the course of assembling a scene, but you can see that it gets a lot of stuff done already. And again, I might push this displacement a little bit because it was just a tiny bit too flat, just to enhance that 3D, that realistic look. All right, so this is how I use Megascans in Bridge. Let's move on to the next stage. Another resource I will be using in the process of making this tutorial and this illustration is Photobash. I'm part of the team, so I'm co-creating the website, and we are introducing a new project, a new product soon, and that's to come in later in 2020. These are kitbash sets, and here you can see a preview of one, and this kitbash set will come very useful in the process of assembling a scene quickly, since my scene isn't really about the street. It's taking place on a street where the focal point of the entire thing is how the cars are turning, how the girl is making them crash, and all of that. So I'll be using this kitbash set to speed things up, since I don't want to waste time creating background objects in such fidelity, whereas this might turn out really well in my shot. So let's take a look at it before we move on. Let's load it quickly. So this should be more than enough for me to get, you know, the regular street vibe going. And you can see a lot of detail on the rooftops and a lot of really nice materials used. So this, in combination with Megascans, will tremendously speed things up for me and make it so that I can focus on making compositional choices and choices with my character placement, and don't worry about all of these, you know, labor-intensive tasks, which this certainly require me to do. In the later stages, if you know, a model like that won't hold up in the shot because it turns out maybe it's too low res or too generic looking. In this case, I don't think that will happen, but if that happens, I can always replace that in the photo bash stage once it's rendered. Now I can see we have some like cool street pieces that might actually come useful in the assembling stage, where I will be like creating the base. This resolution might not be enough, but I can always plot in a Megascan material in order for it to be viable for this shot, since my concrete material will probably be in the foreground. So I think we're ready to go and we can start assembling the scene.